Hi everyone, I'm Simon from Stampix and welcome to Loyalty Expert Talks. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Yuping Liu-Thompkins. Welcome, Yuping. I hope I pronounced your name correct.
Yes, definitely. You got my name exactly right. Thank you, Simon. Glad to be here.
I'm going to put you right on the spot and let you introduce yourself in just 45 seconds if you can do that.
Okay. My name is Yuping Liu-Thompkins. I am a professor of marketing at Old Dominion University. I'm also the director of Loyalty Science Lab Initiative here at the university. Me personally, with the topic of loyalty, probably started about 20 years ago when I was first starting my job at Old Dominion University. At the time, started a collaborative project with a local company providing loyalty services to convenience store industry. And at that point in time, the emphasis was understanding the ROI, the impact of loyalty programs, and really loved the research topic. And from that point on, started doing a lot more research. So over the last 20 years, have been looking at loyalty in a variety of different industries, retail, finance, and so forth, and broadening up to look at what drives customer loyalty and what's the consequence of customer loyalty and so forth. So am I up to 45 seconds?
You're right there. Thanks. Thanks for that intro. So you're a professor of marketing at Old Dominion and at the same time founder and director of Loyalty Science Lab. Can you tell us a little bit more about Loyalty Science Lab, what it does, and other interesting topics?
Sure. Yeah, the Loyalty Science Lab is something that I'm really passionately leading right now. And it's, over time, I think business schools are getting out into the industry a little bit more, connecting what we are doing in the ivory tower with, what's actually happening out there in the business community. So I think the Loyalty Science Lab was created basically with that in mind. There is quite a bit of research actually done by academics on loyalty, customer loyalty, brand loyalty related topics, including loyalty programs, but also other areas. And because where we publish, it's a much more obscure places that a lot of practitioners actually don't read. So, there's lack of dialogue, I think, between the two places. And so Loyalty Science Lab was basically created to address this problem. So our mission is really to advance that knowledge about brand loyalty, about customer loyalty. And so we conduct research projects ourselves to understand drivers of loyalty, understand just different facets of the loyalty psychology and so forth. And then at the same time, we also try to make the academic kind of research content more accessible to our audiences. And we're very fortunate. We're advised by a great advisory board with senior executives from many different companies.
In one of your recent blogs, which is called "Vulnerability of Loyalty in Numbers," we read that loyalty it's much harder to come by today and very vulnerable, but vulnerable, sorry. But at the same time, you still believe in the power of true loyalty. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a reality that with many more brands in the marketplace, and also people have way more information in their hands to make that decision, people are indeed switching brands more often than what it used to be. At the same time, I think that despite that switching, people's desire to have connection with brands, people's desire to have a loyal brand has not really changed. In fact, I've read some research studies recently reporting, I think 97% of the consumers report that they have at least one brand that they're loyal to. And 70, I think is 70 something consumers say they have been with a brand for more than 10 years. I think that's a very, very long time. And so when you look at the brands who are getting it and the brands who are really doing well with customer loyalty, they have a huge competitive advantage, particularly because of so much brand switching these days. So if your customers are actually not engaging as much in that behavior, it's a huge bonus for the business. And research has repeatedly shown that when customers are loyal, you gain multiple benefits. That includes their transaction behavior, they're buying more from you. But beyond that spending behavior, there's also advocacy behavior as well. So consumers are actually referring you to other customers, talking positive word of mouth about you and so forth. So from a business perspective, I think there's a lot to gain from getting that loyalty piece correct, even though it's harder to achieve it. But I think once you get to the nirvana, it's going to be a great place to be.
Okay, that makes sense. And so, in terms of behavioral psychology, so what are some of the emotions that we want to evoke with a loyalty program?
I think this is a bit probably context specific, and also depends on what is the goal that you're trying to reach in loyalty programs. In some situations, I've done some research on habit development. So in some situations, loyalty programs are probably more of a habit development tool,
Hmm.
where you're trying to get people to formulate a habit of buying repeatedly from your company. So in those situations, emotions play a more minimal role. But in many other more involved loyalty programs, I would say there are a couple of things that companies should be looking for. One is just there's a human innate need to feel special. And so, and I'm talking about special, not just in the sense of having tier status. I mean, that's definitely one way to make your customers feel special. But I think feel special is also coming from you personalizing that experience for them.
Hmm.
Because one of the really strength of loyalty programs is you have much more data about customers. And these are customers who voluntarily are sharing that information with you so that they can earn the benefits in the loyalty program. So because of that, I think you can potentially create a much more special customer experience for your consumers, so that they can feel more special by being a customer with you. So I think that feeling of being special, whether it's through this personalized experience or through a status tier or benefits that you provide, is very important. I would probably also say another aspect of emotions is the feeling of empathy and care.
Yeah.
And I think this is particularly important during the pandemic time period. We are not quite out of the woods yet, and over the last 2 years, people, pretty much everybody really, has gone through quite a bit of emotional turbulence, the uncertainty of the pandemic, the inflation, everything that's happening, and so we need to know that there are people out there that care, right? And that's more than just from people. Individuals actually want brands to actually show that they care too. And so I think it was last year, or a recent Bound loyalty study basically says that, not only do consumers feel loyal to brands, but they also want brands to feel loyal to them. And how are brands loyal to them? A big part of that is to show that they actually really care about their experience. I think a lot of people, see when you say loyalty programs, people are just thinking about point
Yeah.
systems, rewards, and so forth. But it's really so much more beyond that. I think the reward component is a very small part of a loyalty program. It's really creating a very specialized channel for companies to be able to engage with their customers. So it needs to think more broadly in terms of what loyalty programs can do.
Yeah. And one of the big challenges for many brands, especially service providers, is that because of digitalization, it's become so much easier for people to switch, right? So customer churn is one of the key challenges. And what is the role of loyalty programs in fighting customer churn?
I think loyalty program actually plays a pretty significant role. There has been industry studies showing that, if customers are engaged with your loyalty program, they are more likely to continue to do business with you. And I think partly that is coming from that point system, right? So coming from the fact that I've already earned points with you, and there's a sunken cost effect, where if I invested my effort over here, then I'm less likely to, waste that effort and try to start anew with someone else. And so there's a switching barrier from a very economical, realistic, practical perspective. But I think on top of that, what we said earlier about building that personalized experience, I think that's where the real switching barrier is really coming from, right? Because after I earn all the points, I can redeem for the reward, and then I could be done. I can just go somewhere else and restart that process. But I think once you use that knowledge that you understand about customers, based on your their purchase behavior, you can customize their experience. You can show them, just you have a general better understanding of your customers. You can cater to their needs better. I think over the long run, that's what really keeps people there and makes people more likely to stay with your business rather than going with some kind of strange brand that they're not familiar with.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of research out there that claims that emotions are one of the key drivers for loyalty. So I'm curious to learn, given all your work in the field of psychology and loyalty, what your findings are on this topic.
Sure. This is actually an interesting topic that emerged from one of our recently published study in the Journal of Retailing. In the study, we essentially did a meta-analysis, which is kind of like the studies of studies, looking at hundreds of studies on retailer loyalty. So essentially, what drives customers to be loyal to a retailer, right, instead of buying from other places. And what we analyzed about 50 years of research on this topic. And we actually broadly classify these drivers of loyalty into the more practical considerations like price, convenience, what we call thinking related factors. We look at the emotional type of drivers, and we also look at social drivers as well through the relationships. What our research basically shows that there's a lot more impact that's coming from emotional loyalty, and it's on the rise probably over the last 50 years, particularly from the moment that the internet actually get conceived. And so all of these processes is really contributing to the customer's loyalty towards retailers. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that the other components are not important. They are still significantly influence the process, but through the process where we see the thinking related factors kind of remain stably important over the course of time, the emotional drivers are much higher over the process. So that when we compare their impact, like the average impact of these emotional drivers, we found that they are roughly about 24% more impactful than the social drivers, and also 50% more impactful than the thinking related, like the traditional considerations of price and convenience. Of course, this does vary across different contexts. And so what we found is that in an online setting, surprisingly, these emotional drivers are actually more important in the online setting. And we also found that in the more hedonic kind of product categories or retail categories, that emotional driver is more important. And in some of the lower involvement product categories, like in food retail, for example, we actually see a stronger impact of these emotional drivers, probably because traditionally these low involvement retailers are not really thinking about moving customers through emotions. So it kind of creates more of an impact in that process. So it's really, you are not necessarily going to do this out of neglect of the other things. You still got to get your fundamentals correct. But if you can build that emotional driver into your shopping process, into customers' interaction with you, our research really suggests that it's going to be impactful.
Yes, and you will have a competitive advantage if you do it right.
Exactly.
Cool. So, for practitioners out there who are designing loyalty programs, what do you think they should be focusing on right now, or what would be your advice to move away from that pure transactional loyalty?
I think that there are a couple of things probably practitioners can consider. One is, I think, the moving from purely focusing on monetary rewards, what were sometimes we call hard rewards, into a more softer rewards arena. I mean, psychology basically differentiates between something called economic exchange, which is monetary based, transactional based, and then from a social exchange. And so when you wanted to have that social exchange, that's where soft rewards are better able to create those kind of social exchange mentality. And so particularly if you're dealing with the long-term customers, these kind of soft rewards is what can build a much longer term non-transactional type of interaction with them. And so that's one. I would say, when you're designing your rewards, what kind of rewards you have to provide to customers is important. And two, I've made this point earlier, is that personalization based on the data, because a lot of times you can design your program and a lot of the design components on the surface are not going to be that different from each other. But I think what's really different in how companies are utilizing their loyalty program, how they're managing their loyalty program, really makes a big difference. And so you can try to design it, you turn it on, and just let it run by itself. You're going to see some behavioral impact from that.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I think it's going to stop at some point, and people get there's no longer a novelty effect. People get tired of it, or they just get used to it. It's not really affecting them anymore. But I think if you are turning on the power of that knowledge that you get from customers, the power of that data, it's going to create a much meaningful impact, I think, for consumers. So the soft rewards to personalization, I would probably also say that even with loyalty programs, and that applies to brands in general too, is that people are looking more for meaningful connections now.
Mhm.
And so the meaningful connection partly is that soft rewards and how you're designing your program. I think the other part is also, what does your loyalty program stand for? Right. And so more and more programs are now integrating the something related to social causes, something related, like you can donate your points for charity, you can use the loyalty program as a means to connect with your friends. And so I think loyalty programs need to move beyond, you do this, I'm going to reward you kind of mentality, to also, I'm providing a meaningful experience for you, right? Whether that's using your points for good or other things that you can potentially do with the brand. And I think that meaning component is important. That kind of relates back to what we said earlier about connections, right? Providing that connection
Mhm.
for customers so they can feel like they are more grounded with their self within their life and so forth, would be significant.
There's you've got your fingers on a ton of academic research, but I'm curious to hear what's your go-to resource for any loyalty news or information.
Yeah, so of course, I read a lot of nerdy articles related to loyalty research, but beyond that, I think when it comes to industry news, I would probably say my two biggest source. One is Wise Marketer. They publish a lot of great loyalty related content, so I definitely read that a lot. The other one is probably the CRMC weekly roundup type of, it's something that's sent through email and where they compile some of the most significant findings over the course of the week. And it's a bit more retail focused, but I think there's a good good loyalty component in there that I read quite a bit as well.
Cool. And as we're hosting this series, it's great to have had the benefit to interview many experts like yourself. But who do you feel is still missing on this talks? Is there an expert that you can advise us to reach out to?
um Experts, I think that I can think about a couple. And so two of the people I would recommend are individuals actually on the board for our loyalty science lab. I would say Sean Clayson, who's the chief strategy officer at Bound Loyalty, would be a great person to talk to about this area. Another person would be Stuart Pearson at Concilium Group. I really admire his thought leadership, in the space of loyalty and branding in general. And then I will also suggest a academic name, Stein van Osseller at Cornell University. He has done a lot of brand and loyalty related research, and I think he would be a great person to talk to as well.
Cool. Thanks so much, Yuping, for your time. Wishing you a lovely day, and let's stay in touch.